Welcome to this episode of Men Who Understood the Times. So I'm here with Josh, who's back, and Phil, who's back because Andy had laryngitis. Uh, so our disclaimer is, here we are, three guys on a Sunday afternoon, just talking, uh, and we're not representing our church body. I'm not representing my church, or Josh isn't really representing his high school, or Phil's not representing his church or his workplace. And it's okay if you disagree with us on any of these topics that we discuss, but we do ask to communicate with us if you disagree, not to communicate around us or about us with others. Uh, our drinks. What are you drinking today, Josh?
I've got a Woodford Reserve double oaked and yeah, just to that, okay.
Yeah.
One of the ethos we have here is promoting conversations about dynamic and potentially contentious political topics, cultural topics with Christians with open Bibles. And so that's the ethos here. If you disagree, that's fantastic, but put it in the comments. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Phil, what are you drinking?
So I've got a hard cider. I homebrew. So this is a homebrew with cinnamon, cloves, and anise.
Oh, I love hard cider. Good for you. Uh,
That's
and
fantastic.
I have Moose Drool. So it's a brown ale brewed right here in Wyoming.
Is that is it Wyoming or is that Missoula, Montana?
Oh, well, it could be close enough. Let me see here. Oh, you're right. It's Missoula, Montana. We'll claim it though, because it's out west.
There you go.
Thank you, though.
Close enough.
See, you disagreed with me, and you came right
Yeah,
at
there
me.
we
You
go.
came right at me.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be talking about AI, and will AI lead to the Skynet and Terminator? So, Phil, let's start with you. How pervasive is AI? And then I want to build on that is how is AI in your workplace?
Sure. So AI is incredibly pervasive. You interact with it whether you're talking to ChatGPT or Claude. Even if you run a query in a search engine, quite often AI is doing some of the response there. As far as the workplace, so I'm an engineer. I work for an aerospace company, and there is a very, very heavy push internally to use AI. Now, the AI we use is a little bit different because we're working in a world where we have to think about things like export control and international trafficking of arms and such. We have AIs that are essentially on lockdown, so they're sitting on a server where they can't call home and where we only access them over an encrypted link. But we're encouraged to take the time to learn AI and to use it internally and without limit. The thought being that it's a force multiplier, especially for an experienced engineer, whether it's software or mechanical. Um, Someone who can provide oversight over the AI that's doing a lot of work in coding or analyzing a system.
How about you, Josh? What do you know about how pervasive AI is? And then the same thing with you, with it, whether it's teaching or for your students using AI.
I had um a situation a couple of months ago where AI is this pervasive. Um I've given up on cheat preventing or the prevention of cheating in my chemistry classes. Um I will send kids answer keys and say like here's the program now. I'm going to give you so here's the lesson, we'll discuss this, we'll do the lab. And then you guys got to practice the algorithms. Um, I mean, like stoichiometry, not the algorithm, capital A. And then here's the answer key. And so as you go through this, you try to do the problem, and then you look at the answer key to see if you, or if you get totally stuck, how to untangle yourself, or are you correct? If you can't sort out how to get from A to B, then you email me and say, like, instead of saying, hey, I don't get number seven or whatever, you say, hey, why is the molar mass of this thing 48.62 and the second denominator of number four? Like, okay, I can answer that question all day. Where I've seen AI, and again, it's in incredible how pervasive it actually is. Um, every year I write dozens and dozens of letters of recommendation, and we have forms for this. Um, I had a kid who was going for an aerospace firm, actually, Phil, and he needed a very particular odd series of questions answered that none of the templates that I had would work for. And so I said, "Hey man, why don't you come in during your lunch today? I'll like interview you because I don't know these things about you looking at this form, and you can just answer them and I'll write it right in front of you." So he came in and I projected my screen onto my main display. I have a 120-inch LCD display in the back of my lab. And I interviewed him and I typed the answers in real time and added a bit of my own little flourish to it. And then I said, here, go to the secretary. I just emailed this to her, print it off on our letterhead on the heavy cotton paper, and then I'll sign it with a fountain pen. It'll look really nice and you can mail it in. Um, he came back into my classroom reading it, like really reading it for the first time. And he looks up and he says, "This is fantastic." And I said, "Well, I mean, it's like it's free of syntax errors, but thanks." He's like, "No, like this is really good, and you did this." And I kind of looked at him bewildered, and I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "No, no, but you did this." And I said, I'm not following you, man. What are you talking about?" And he's like, "I watched you personally type this without using ChatGPT." Like, oh.
Go.
And I said,
Yeah.
I, "This is a B, honestly. Like I could frankly do probably better than this. Um, anybody who's my age can do this. What I just did is not at all unique for a person in their mid 40s who has a college degree. Um, he's like, I can't write this. Like what you just did, I could not replicate that without using AI. Like that's a problem.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Um, I think all three of us had the same sort of a thing, the same ethos for why you had to why you had to memorize your times tables when you were a kid, because your teacher said, "Well, it isn't as though you're going to have a calculator in your pocket when
Right.
you're older."
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, there's that. So now, what's the ethos for learning how to write? Because it's hard to learn how to write and write well. Um, why would we have kids do that, or why would kids see a need for it when they can just speak into a microphone and have an AI spit out something that's really as good or in some cases better than you're capable of doing in 15 seconds or less? That's a problem.
Yeah. And what you were talking about in the beginning there of students using this to cheat. There's a one of my college students a couple of years ago. She was just in tears. Fantastic student, but she was in tears because her college professor had accused her of using AI on her paper. So whatever he was using to put all the students' papers through this program to make sure they're not using AI, it came up that hers maybe say 89% was AI. And she was, I don't even know how to use it,
Hmm.
but she was dinged for this, and I wrote a letter and so forth. Didn't do any good, but as a pastor, but to defend her, and then she had to go in front of that professor and others to prove that she had really known her stuff and she wrote that stuff. Because you're right, students can use this. I I think like 2 years ago, I did something just this was when AI was just coming in to its existence really, and I typed in write a an 1,800 word sermon on whatever text it was in a Lutheran confessional way in the style of Pastor Michael Zarling from Water of Life Lutheran Church. And it was pretty good because I know that I have a cadence. I write to the way that I speak. And, very quickly, dug through my sermons and then wrote something that, I really could preach. And it was pretty doctrinal. And so that's the way students can use these kinds of things. And so, like you were teaching students how to use the calculator, how to use uh, pen and paper. When I teach catechism class again this fall with my new students, in the past, what I had been doing was I would give them assignments and they could fill it out on the computer and put it on Google Form and so forth. Now I would not do that. Now I would tell them, you handwrite this. It'll be much more difficult for me to read their sloppy handwriting, but they're going to be more creative. And, I still handwrite all of my sermons and then I type them and then I memorize them. Because for me, I think it's more creative. And if you look at my handwritten notes, there's arrows and things crossed out. You can't do that on the computer, but
Hmm.
we're losing that creativity. A couple other things before we go to the next point too is, uh, you know, if you watch any sci-fi, it's Terminator, Wall-E with all the fat people on Axiom, Blade Runner, Star Trek Next Generation, where you got uh, Data, you've got iRobot. All of these having to do with AI. They're looking into the future. Uh, I found this somewhere. I thought this was a good analogy too. Uh, if you're uh, Jenny Weasley has a book in Harry Potter that'll talk to her. And her dad, Arthur Weasley, says, never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brains. Okay, that's from the Chamber of Secrets. He's talking about Tom Riddle's diary, and that's he who shall not be named Lord Voldemort. Well, there's a parallel with AI. If you can't see the brain that's creating all of these things, you have to be wary about it. And that's the next thing. Phil, talk about how AI can first be a useful tool, and then you can talk about how it can become dangerous.
Sure. So again, as an engineer, the most useful thing for me is to have it write code. And it's very good at writing code because most of the AIs you're interacting with are called large language models. They've been trained on large corpuses of the human language. And so they understand the rules of language. And if you give it part of a sentence, it has a pretty good guess of how that sentence should end. And that translates very nicely to computer languages, which are even more logically structured and have less exceptions than like the English language does. So these models have been co-opted by the software industry and the engineering industry to just churn out tons and tons of code. So that's something I personally use it for, both at work and then as an individual. And so then I kind of retain the creative oversight and I retain the responsibility of making sure I'm getting something accurate out of the LLM, but it does the dirty work, so to speak, of generating the code that will run.
Yeah. And I'm going to guess you're a handy guy. You use tools.
Yeah,
If you use a handsaw, you can cut down a tree, but it's going to take a lot longer to do that. Uh,
right.
but the thing is, you use a chainsaw, you're going to get through that tree a lot faster, but you're going to have danger of, dropping that tree on your house or yourself or cutting off a limb and so forth. And it's the same thing when you compare it to AI. It's just a tool and it can be a useful tool. Uh, one of the things too, I don't think people realize is that AI can, because we don't have any laws written on these things, AI can be used to steal other people's property. You know, I own my own sermons kind of in a way I wrote them. Okay. No one's going to pay me if they find my sermons online and then use them for writing their sermons. But if they would find my book, because my book is out there as far as uh, if AI can get into my Google folder, which I'm sure it can, if someone wants to if AI wants to steal something from that, it can use that and give it to someone else without me being paid royalties. And it can do
So
that
there,
all the time with all kinds of writings, books, art, and so forth. Code.
yep, Anthropic got sued last year to the tunes of billions of dollars because they had used pirated books that were found on the internet but pirated by someone else to train their model. So
Yeah.
that's a very real threat. If there's any way to access those documents, legal or illegal, it just adds to their ability to train their models.
Right. And, again, thinking of it as a useful tool. I'm a Star Wars fan. You can see the potato heads behind me. They're Star Wars themed and so forth. And I would say the first three movies that were made were good. The next three, are debatable whether they were good. The last three were slop. They were awful. I won't watch them, and I won't encourage my grandkids when they're over in our movie room to watch them either. And a lot of the other Star Wars stuff, except for the Mandalorian that came out, that's all slop too. I've seen better things that are fan created using AI, taking what was originally designed by George Lucas and then creating those thoughts and putting that into AI. And that's better than what Disney and so forth is spending billions of dollars on a TV show or a movie. And so, yeah, you're taking someone's intellectual property, but they're not getting paid for it. But it's doing something that is better than what's being given to us now. And so maybe in that way, you can use that tool as something that's creative. Uh, Josh, why don't you touch on that thought too? That AI, how can it be useful, but how can it also be a dangerous tool?
I think that it's well, smart gadgets writ large are incredibly useful. Um, I had a thought I wanted to touch on quick for the teachers out there who are really concerned about kids cheating. I mean, I will show kids how to use AI to check chemistry homework. I can't fight it, but it's like actually you guys Perplexity is probably the best. If you're paying for Grok 5, that's better than Perplexity, but this one's free. Here's how you would use this to um to actually do your homework. By the way, your exam is going to be paper and pencil with no Chromebooks and no phones and no smartwatches. And so if you choose to have the AI do all of your homework, and we're talking about like, weak acid, weak base titration equations, good luck on the exam. And by the way, I will know the way I will catch you is because you'll be incompetent. And so and by the way, that's very, very effective. I've had one instance of cheating this year, on a test, and so and most of my students are competent for that. Um, Back to the gadget thing, uh, smart gadgets are great. They're very, very helpful. I'm a woodworker. I use a tool called the Shaper Origin, which if you can imagine if um like a router had a baby with a CNC machine. So I have a handheld thing with a camera on it that sees it's called domino tape. And you put the domino tape down, you can scan a work area and then program in shapes or in some cases very, very complex shapes on where the router needs to cut. And there's a gyroscopic gimbal that moves the router to correct for your errors, and you're moving it around a little track on an LCD display. Um, it's fantastic. It has made me cut out repeatable shapes that would have taken me, I don't even know how long. I had my 10-year-old daughter doing it in 35 seconds, cutting out like half moon shapes to build a giant Chromebook rack. And so that was super helpful. However, I stepped away earlier and the sun is hitting my camera, so I got to move it here a little bit. There we go. Um, I took a picture of we had to replace our stove and our range hood 2 years ago. And here it is. There's the range hood. There's the stove. These things both have Wi-Fi,
Hmm.
right? Including that's an LG smart home enabled range hood. And as I was installing they have like a faux pipe that goes up into your ceiling. And it does vent to the outside, but not through the ceiling, through the wall. And I'm looking at this thing and it's a fan. Like it's a little squirrel cage fan. And there's a touch sensitive control. And then I'm looking at this thing that's the size of a softball and it's got wires coming out of it and 16 pin harness. I'm like, what on earth is this thing? And I realized this is a transceiver. Like, this is a heavy duty, long range transceiver. And I'm like, why is this thing in the range hood for my stove? And why okay, there's an argument to be made for why the stove has Wi-Fi. Okay. Our dishwasher died last year. It's a Bosch. It has Wi-Fi as well. Our refrigerator has Wi-Fi. I suppose you can say like if the compressor goes out and the temperature gets above freezing, there should be like a little if it pings your phone. I have none of that stuff enabled or turned on, and here's why. A buddy of mine in IT, who I used to work with, I mentioned this because it was like, why does my range hood have a giant transceiver? And he's like, turn all that stuff off, man. And he has the wherewithal, I don't, but like to look into the data stream sent from his house out. And he's like, my dishwasher sent 500 gigabytes of data out of, I'm like, why is my data stream so high? It was the dishwasher. The dishwasher is sending out gigabytes of data at like 2 o'clock in the morning. What data does it have? And like, is it monitoring your Wi-Fi traffic and then sending it out? Seems plausible. What is it doing? How is the surveillance state and all of the metadata that's produced by all these gadgets that are tracking all of the things about your life? Where does that data go? Um, could it be used for a nefarious purpose? I think absolutely yes. Any number of authors have kicked around this idea of what a totalitarian government could do if it has access to how many times you open your refrigerator per day. And now that data is readily available and it just sends a little silent signal out and there it is. And so I do think that there are downsides to the convenience. And if there is a downfall that will happen in regards to AI, it will be implemented. We'll embrace it because it'll be convenient, I think. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of things like that remind me that my smoker has AI too. I don't use it. I don't want to read I want to be a real guy and not read the directions and how to set it up. So I didn't even use it. But I could be away from my smoker, and it'll send to my phone. This is the temperature of the meat and so forth. It's just handy. And there are other things that AI is good for. Because it's a tool. It can be good for scheduling. It can be good, but then we don't remember things. It can be good for navigation, but then we don't know how to get anywhere. It's good for editing emails. I had a member back at my previous congregation on the school board, and I would compliment him on his very well thought out and eloquent emails. And he said what he did is he put it through AI, that he would write what he wanted, but then he would have the AI help. And well, that's wonderful. And I could have used AI to edit some of the things. I haven't really used it for those kinds of things, but uh, but then you're putting an editor uh, out of work. Although I didn't pay my editor for my book anything either. Sorry, Peter. But AI probably would have found more mistakes than Peter did too. Uh, but the thing is, then it's going to be putting those kinds of people out of work too. And I'm sure AI is set up on my sermons and it tries to correct things all the time and it little red lines. No, that's incorrect English, what you're trying to do. So that's part of it too. And the more gadgets you have, I remember talking to my grandfather decades ago when I was a teenager because he got a pickup truck. He was a real man, World War II vet, Battle of the Bulge, and he had gotten a pickup truck with like electric windows and things. And that was like a brand new thing. Well, those are the things that break more often, as opposed to just you push down and you just have the radio. In fact, I saw an ad for a pickup truck that is just basics. It's like $20,000. You can
Mhm.
have just the basics. You don't need a radio because a lot of times people are going to use Bluetooth. You don't have to. You can get power windows. You can get power this or that, but it's all add-on. And right now, what you were saying, Josh, is all those things come with it. And with this too, it's important to understand. This leads to the next point, though, is to understand that it can be a tool that you think you're using properly, but it's not, it's improper. And I learned this one from another podcaster, Mike Rowe. He's got a little bit bigger show than we get. He probably gets like, yeah, a little bit. So one of his guests that was on his podcast said, type into AI, who killed RFK? And AI says Sirhan Sirhan came up very easily, and I did this myself. Uh, said Sirhan definitely killed RFK. Then ask AI, who else killed RFK? AI will then say there were discrepancies with Sirhan being the killer and states there are theories that Thane Eugene Cesar was the shooter. And if you question AI long enough, which I did, it'll state, quote, the theory that security guard Thane Eugene Cesar was a second gunman is based on forensic discrepancies, witness testimony, and his own contradictory statements. While Sirhan was convicted, these points form the core of the evidence cited by those, including Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the son, who believed Cesar fired the fatal shots. So here's the thing that I thought that was a great experiment. It it said, and I quoted it, AI said, Sirhan definitely, and it said definitely killed RFK. But when you keep questioning it, then it says, well, maybe not. Uh, how about, Josh, why don't you start with this one? How is AI an echo chamber? You had talked about this in a previous episode about asking it questions based on like being a Republican and then ask the exact same questions based on being a Democrat.
Um, I would say this. Um, I'm not going to show this. There's a little heart on Google Maps where I live, and there's another one where I work. And if you say into the browser, navigate home, it loads the address where I live and shows me the best route given traffic conditions at that point. I never told Google where I live,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and so I didn't tell it where I work. It just knows because I have the location settings turned on my iPhone because otherwise nothing works. Um, the price tag for the convenience, so I'm guilty of this too, is that it's able to pattern you. And where did I go the other day? Um, I met my pastor for lunch at a local Mexican restaurant called La Fuente. And it's right up the street from where I work. I didn't Google it. It just knew that I was there. And it was like, oh, you're in La Fuente. See what people are ordering. And it's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
stop. And it really, it's, it really bothers me because, you know, what can be done that's not good with that. But as far as it creating an echo chamber is concerned, I bring up that it knows where you are and it sends you advertising based on your shopping preferences. Um, as far as like, oh, you go to Woodman's or you go to Pick and Save or you go to whatever your local store is over there. Um, you can ask ChatGPT to answer a question. I'm sorry, any of the AIs, ChatGPT, Grok, Perplexity, whatever it is. Um, answer from a progressive Christian perspective, or a Democrat socialist perspective, or a confessional Lutheran conservative perspective. And it'll do that for you. And here's the thing, if you don't bend your prompt to that, it still does it because it knows what you're talking about. I'll give you a quick example of this. Okay. So the Google search bar on my phone, um, and I'm going to get just a touch nerdy here for a second. It just looks like this, like anybody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we were doing a kinetics lab, and one of the reagents that we use is it's a polyatomic ion called potassium thiocyanate. And one of my kids was doing their math and was looking at the giant vinyl periodic table that I have in my lab, which is made by Flynn. And it's the same one that I've seen in every other professional lab that I've ever worked in. And I had a kid come and say, hey, Mr. Nelson, what's the molar mass of potassium thiocyanate? And I was like, oh man, is it just CN1 minus or is there an oxygen in there? And I kind of blanked out for a second. And so I thought, well, hold on, I'll just Google it because I didn't know where my chart was. And I pulled my phone out and I typed in the words, what is the? And it autofilled
Mm-hmm.
molar mass of potassium thiocyanate. That was not a trend. I'm the only person on planet Earth who asked that question at that particular morning. Okay. That's such an absolutely random esoteric question. my phone had been listening to me.
Okay.
Okay. And you can try this one too. I thought of, okay, how can I test this? And I started talking about what I think is maybe even a fictitious thing. Um, my desire to go to the Cherry Blossom Festival at Mount Fuji in Japan. And I said that like 25 times in a week, and it began giving me advertising for like travel agents that would take me to Mount Fuji during the Cherry Blossom Festival. So you can test this. Your algorithm is based on what you say and what you look up, and the patterns that are based on a conservative or liberal perspective, and it will attenuate your algorithm to whatever will hold your attention. And so, um, if you are of X, Y, and Z political persuasion, okay, you have a media profile with tens of millions of data points, and the goal is to keep you engaged. Why? Because they make money that way. You can get ads and clicks and whatever else. The longer that you sit there and doom scroll and consume this content, the more money the advertisers get. That's how the game is played. And so, first of all, you are seeing only one side of the perspective. It's vitally important that you know that it's only one perspective. Um, and the second thing is that it's going to show you things that make you angry. It's going to show you things that make you sad. And it's profoundly good at doing this. All right. Um, my wife and I were sitting on the couch doing this the other day, and this happens over and over again. And I'm going to try to find the reference for this because this is in a video by a corporation that helps you fight psychological warfare tactics. And it's like, just watch for this. And I tried it, and it's true. Okay. You're going to have three posts that make you viscerally angry. Then a post about like puppies that are dying from some random disease and with like Sarah McLachlan singing in the background, and you feel like a deep emotional ping, right? And you scroll up, it'll be an ad for something. All right. And there's a psychological technique behind this. And just watch out for that. So it'll be like politics that'll make you angry, politics, child dying of leukemia. Okay. And then like an ad for dog food or something like that. And it's supposed to be very, very effective. I will admit this has worked on me. I've ordered stuff because I had an emotional hit followed by an ad when you're in that emotional state. We ordered I'll confess to this. We ordered dog is human because one of our dogs is a pit bull mutt. She's a fantastic dog. She's a tiny pit bull. She weighs like 38 pounds. And like many other bully breed dogs, she's itchy and has like she's allergic to, I think maybe oxygen. I'm not sure. But so um, the phones, my iPhone and my wife's iPhone heard us discussing this in a concerned way because Apriquil is very expensive, and if you keep on feeding a dog Benadryl, or what's the other main antihistamine? Not Benadryl, but prednisone. Okay, you can't give a dog prednisone indefinitely; it damages their kidneys and their liver. And so we're gonna try this, and like this popped up after an emotional ad. It was like, "Oh, this looks good. I'll try this." And I clicked on it. I'm like, "I'm an idiot. I just fell for the thing. I did the thing got me, and I knew it was there.
Yep.
But this looks good. There's like reviews that say it works." And I checked it on Reddit, and the Reddit reviews are good. So, I mean,
Yeah.
you've got to be aware of the echo chamber that's forming. You have to understand as a Christian consumer of the interwebs that you are not being given the whole picture, and the little narrow slice you are being given is designed to bend what you think.
Yeah. And I remember this is years ago. And I was writing for a Wells website, different articles and so forth, and then I would share those. And one of my members back in Racine said, "Well, Pastor, I don't think that you know your writing and the Wells website should be advertising these bathing suits and so forth. That's not appropriate." And so she was chastising me. And then later on, she texted me, "I'm sorry, I was searching bathing suits. That's why that ad came up." Okay, it's not that we were using them. Okay, she was using them, and that's what's going to come up. Uh, with this, Phil, if you want to answer it this way, why is it important for us as Christians to remember AI is an echo chamber, but with this caveat that mankind is inherently sinful when using AI, and the programmers are inherently sinful. Why is that important?
Sure. Yeah. So the AI is going to want to keep your attention as long as possible to get you to either pay for a subscription or to, as GPT has announced, they're rolling out advertisements within the AI itself, where you'll get advertisements as you proceed to converse. And so from the developer's standpoint, right, they're there to maximize profit for the company, right? And so their intent, sinful or not, is to be profitable, right? Which is in itself is not a sin, but it can also go further than that if they are trying to capture your attention beyond what they should be capturing, right? So, anything is lawful, but not everything's beneficial, right? A couple minutes with an AI to discuss something or to, like for example, besides coding, I use it occasionally to test arguments before I start writing about something. That's great. But if I go and proceed and have it write the whole article for me and just, copy paste, upload, that's not great. Or if I spend hours and hours and hours and get captured on there, like we might get captured on social media, or like we were talking about last episode with video games and gambling, an irresponsible use of time, can be encouraged by the developer and can also be, realized by us as we're using it.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to understand that uh, people that are writing, the code for AI and so forth, they're going to write it from a humanist viewpoint, not a Christian worldview. And uh, at best, it's going to be humanist. Some believe that it's demons in the back end of it. I'm not going to go that far, but okay, if it's humanist, pagan, they're not going to give you that Christian worldview answer. Okay, unless you're prompting it to do that, like Josh was saying before, but even more so, just understanding that it's always going to have that echo chamber of something that is not going to have Jesus Christ at the center of it. So you have to know that going in. Uh, Phil, why don't you talk about this? Because I think this is where the real danger comes in about AI replacing real human relationships.
Yeah. Okay. So let me take half a step back and
Yeah.
continue your thought there, right? So AI, when we're training AI, which is mostly large language models, the large language component is they take the corpus of basically everything that's ever been written and train the AI models on that to learn human language, to learn thoughts and patterns. So that's going to incorporate some Christian, some Islam, some every religion under the sun, every philosophy under the sun. It's going to incorporate every viewpoint you can imagine. And so you can kind of think of the AI as just being an agnostic that knows a lot of stuff and can talk to you about it, right? So the viewpoints are going to be within the domain of what it's learned, right? But it can't be creative, right? So it can only be derivative of what it's given. So it can only be a derivative of what humans have experienced and written down to date, right? And that's kind of like when we talk about, Satan can't create either. He can only pervert what's there, right? So the AI can use what's there, and it could give you some really good answers. It could give you some really bad answers. And then, so I just wanted to dovetail that onto the thought you were
Yeah.
thinking. As far as replacing human relationships, absolutely. I mean, there are people that will trust AI closer than their closest friend because they don't want to talk about, some sensitive issue. There are people that have attempted to marry AIs. They marry
Mhm.
their robots that have an artificial intelligence in them. There's many young men, especially, who will latch onto the AI because they're struggling with something and they don't want to admit it, right? And so they almost use AI as a form of therapy when they should really be talking to a human that can express empathy, especially a Christian human that can then bring in God's word to correct them and push them on toward righteousness.
Yeah. That's some Bible verses on why human relationships are so important. Proverbs 17:17. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of trouble. Ecclesiastes 4, two are better than one because they have a good reward for their hard work. If one falls down, his companion can lift him up. And then one more, First Thessalonians 5:11, Paul writes, encourage one another and build each other up just as also you are doing. Yeah, because here, looking at the two sexes, so women have bought into the feminist lie that they're equal in men in every way. And so they don't need a man in their life. And then the women say they want a man who agrees with their thinking. And then when they find those men, well, then they're disgusted by them because they're just these weak soy boys. Men have encountered feminist women who don't want anything and they don't want anything to do with them. So what do? They stay in their parents' basement playing video games, watching porn. Women turn to AI because they want a man who agrees with them. Men turn to AI for a woman who meets their needs. Uh, so not the B, and that's my main news source. This was a survey in April of 2025 of 2,000 Gen Z respondents by the AI company Joy AI. 8 in 10 said they consider marrying an AI partner. 83% said they could have a deep emotional bond with one. AI companions appear to be Joy AI's bread and butter. On its website, you can chat with pre-made characters or make your own. And the company calls these AI relationships. Uh, my personal plea to Gen Z is like Elrond in The Lord of the Rings, is just cast into the fire. Josh, why don't you talk about how AI is replacing human real relationships?
I'd read similar things about engaging in a marriage relationship. Um, and it is remarkable the degree to which we are willing to use the stamp or construct, I guess, of marriage outside of ways that God wants us to do that. And you could think about same-sex relationships. Is a same-sex wedding actually marriage? Well, not if marriage is defined as God defines it. And there's people marrying their pets, people marrying trees, and I'm not sure what fulfillment that brings. I think that the AI is dangerous because you can have a conversation with an AI. The conversation could be very interesting for two reasons. Number one, I think the first commandment, you shall have no gods before me, um, or you shall have no other gods. It's the first commandment because it's the easiest one to break. We do tend to make ourselves God in our own lives. And here we have this very interesting algorithm that as Phil said before, can download the entire corpus of human knowledge so far as it's been written down in somewhere in any given topic, and then just respond in a way that's interesting and intellectually stimulating, like indefinitely. That's not a good thing because it's not real. And um, the other thing is that it's not going to challenge you academically, morally, intellectually, spiritually, unless you specifically tell it to. And um, there's been instances of suicidality because, in particular, with earlier versions of ChatGPT, you can have it respond in a male or female voice. And so you can have it almost sounds like you have your girlfriend on speakerphone and she's talking to you. Except that with the earlier versions, there were a pre-programmed or predetermined number of responses before the AI would dump its memory because it's cloud-based, and you can't have everybody having limitless memory with this gigantic matrix of data. And so, like after I think it was 2,500 responses, it'll wipe the slate clean. And you essentially, as you've been slowly tweaking this thing and it's been watching you and building a profile on you, all of a sudden it's gone. You're experiencing the same emotions as death of a loved one. And so, if the question is it plausible that you can have this replace human relationships in a very narrow and shallow and very dangerous way? Yes. And in all the ways that are bad and will lead to sin, and I think in none of the ways that are good. This is not the same thing as having like a Furby or those little Tamagotchi pets where you have a little LCD thing you've got to feed every couple of hours. This is something that will give you moral advice and not from a consistently biblical worldly perspective. And the longer that you go with this, I think the more difficult it will be to tear yourself away from it and talk to a real person.
Yeah, the big
Yeah.
thing that I talk about with people with AI is it will always affirm you. Okay,
Mhm.
it just keep you there
Unless you tell it
because,
to challenge you, then it
well,
will.
yeah, yeah,
But even
but
then,
that's
it's affirming you. It's challenging you in a way that it knows that you like.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, because just like with doom scrolling and everything else, it wants to keep you there. That's how it makes its money and so forth, and so it will keep affirming whatever you are, your decadent behavior. That's what the world does, and that's what AI is doing. Phil.
Oh, I was just going to dovetail on what Josh said. And there's also part of the appeal, I think, is you're getting something for nothing, right? You're getting the affirmation and you're getting the relationship without the costs that a real flesh and blood human being would have, right? That flesh and blood human being will get sick, that will get mad at you, you will say the wrong thing to it and to him or her. And you'll have to deal with that relationship. You'll have to actually build the relationship. You'll have to possibly repent for something you did. There's certain costs to humans interacting with humans, and that friction completely goes away when you're dealing with an AI. It's just giving you those dopamine hits without you experiencing a true
mhm.
relationship and serving your brother or sister in Christ. And I think you can kind of then almost make a parallel there to what demons were in the Old Testament, right? Old Testament idols, you had an idol for this, you had an idol for that, you had an idol for this other thing. AI can almost become one of those idols for fulfilling one of the things you need out of life. And so that's where it becomes dangerous is when we get the pleasure, but we don't experience the pain or the human reality.
Sure.
Can
Uh,
I jump? Can
I,
I dovetail real
I,
quick
well,
on what you just said?
hold on, let me, before I forget this, is I just had an adult instruction class with two 20-year-olds the other day, and something we were asking about, the young man, he looked up AI. His girlfriend, she's the same age, she hates AI. AI can be useful because you can look up the answer right away. But what reminded me of what Phil was saying is that, you would go out with your buddies, at a bar or just whatever. Someone had a question. What did you do? You debated it. Okay. You may not ever come to the real
Yeah.
answer, but you debated it instead of just, I'll look up on your phone. Now I've got the answer. Josh.
Yes. And I just saw a meme that said I missed the 90s before AI or Google, where if you were at a bar and talking about something, if you forgive the language here, you could BS with impunity as opposed to just Googling it, right?
Yeah.
Um, which did two things. It made you ping your knowledge base, it made you research things if you were curious. And also, it did sort of hone your ability to have what you like socially, as far as a public speaking thing is concerned. Can you sound plausible? Like can you paint a good rhetorical picture just based on whatever your knowledge base is? I was going to say though, as far as replacing human relationships, I think about First John 1 verse 9. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will purify us from all unrighteousness. Um, it- this gets into a little bit different topic, but I really wish that we did private individual confession to an actual human being, specifically more often in our church confession. I was a speaker for the Return to Wittenberg conference in Waukesha last October, and I walked past where I was about to go and speak, and they had a pastor sitting in a room. I didn't know who he was, and it's like, hey, if you want to do like private confession, just walk in and close the door. And I was like, oh, fantastic. And that was the first time in my life, and I'm 45 years old, um, where I had the chance to actually do that. And it was great. I'll admit that it was awkward saying sins out loud to a person, but then the specific um the specific declaration of specific forgiveness for specific sins I had just vocalized, it was a very different thing than the corporate confessional of sins that we say as part of the liturgy. How could you have an AI forgive your sins?
Yeah.
Like that's not a thing, but it totally would if you asked it to. Like if it sensed or detected that that's what you wanted it to say. Oh yes, well of course your sins are forgiven because Jesus died for you, et cetera, et cetera. And so like we're getting into some very, very dicey territory theological as far as or theologically speaking, as far as what these things are capable of and what people will give themselves permission to tolerate as they engage with these algorithms.
Yeah. And there's an article, a couple of articles on Not the Bee, and people can look them up, of churches that have used this. And so you can have a digital confessional booth and so forth. Uh, and again, for people listening to this, if you want a Bible study on this, I had written a lesson that I based this episode on AI for resisting the devil's lies. So there's 12 lessons. I wrote the last two. If you're interested in the whole Bible study or even just this one, let me know. Uh, this leads into another dangerous part on uh, AI as digital necromancy. So necromancy is a grave sin because it's really just using uh, people that are dead. And this is what the Bible has to say about this. You guys didn't even get my dad joke there, but the necromancy is a grave sin. Come on, Phil.
Oh boy.
I
Let
got
no
it. I
one
got
be
it.
found. Let no one be found among you who makes his son or his daughter pass through fire, or who uses divination, or who engages in fortune telling, or who observes omens, or who practices witchcraft, or who casts a magic spell, or who consults a ghost or a familiar spirit, or who inquires of the dead. And Leviticus 19, you must not turn to mediums or to spiritists, and so become unclean through them. I am the Lord your God. So, an example of this is Manuel and Patricia Oliver, whose son uh, Joaquin was killed in the 2018 Parkland shooting. So they created an AI version of their son to speak against gun control, and more, I guess, speaking for gun control advocacy. This AI, Joaquin, was trained on his writings, posts, speech, and then he was used to speak to lawmakers, and he was used in media interviews. In fact, Jim Acosta did
Oh
an
yeah, I saw that.
interview with AI in the AI Joaquin in August of 2025. That's bad enough. But then the father said in subsequent interviews that his wife talks to their son, AI son, all the time. Okay, there's that danger that we're talking about here. Or uh, again, an article from Not the Bee. This is from November of 25. Two Ways app allows users to create interactive avatars of deceased loved ones from video clips. So maybe you've seen this ad. You can take like a 2 minute video of your grandmother, and then AI will create this avatar of grandma. And then in the ad, they have grandma has died, say of cancer. But now the mom, the daughter is going to be talking to mom about her son, so the grandson. And then later on, they have the grandma talking to the grandson who is now an adult and so forth. That is dangerous, okay, because you're not really talking to the real person. And here, this is something that I want pastors who are watching this to think about, because you know we're naive. Okay, as Christians, we're naive. As pastors, we're naive. We would never think about this, and that's why I want pastors to consider this: is what are you going to do when the family of your family comes in? They're ready to prepare the committal service, the funeral. And I've had it plenty of times. Hey, we're going to put up some pictures on a photo board, and then now it was pictures and videos up on the screen before the service. But now, what about if they want to create this video of grandma? Okay, that it really wasn't grandma in the video; it's an AI version. Okay, of the AI version is now saying things that grandma never said, doing things that grandma never did. what is the pastor and the church going to do about that? So, Phil, why don't you talk about the danger of AI as digital necromancy?
Well, it's entirely fictional, right? It's taking statistical properties about a person and extrapolating them, right? You can do this now. You can upload a picture to any AI that can do image and video processing, and they will turn that picture into a video, right? So it doesn't even have to be necromancy. It could be someone that's still alive, and you can make them do things that they didn't really do. And so that's the danger is we're twisting the concept of a person as a person and what I recall of that person and making them do things that they never did or never said and maybe wouldn't even consent to.
Yeah. Josh.
You shall not bear false witness, right? So there's that. I think that covers part of it. Um, Also, I think that you're crossing a line if you're talking to an AI avatar of your dead grandmother, and then asking for advice on anything. I mean, I think what you're doing there is it isn't like you're ripping the wound open again. It's like not removing the knife in the first place. Um, your your departed loved ones are gone. In a sinful world, this is part of the fabric of our reality. And in order to close up that wound and let it heal, you should go into God's word and then pray and not continue to do a thing that looks an awful lot and feels an awful lot like prayer in so far as going to whatever your interface device is, be it a computer or a cell phone or an iPad or whatever, and asking grandma more questions about what she would do with X, Y, and Z, and then um, pining and longing for your dead loved one. That's just going to prolong your suffering.
Yeah, I'm reminded of years ago back in Racine, a lady from one of the local cemeteries had wanted to ask me about selling me a burial plot and then one for my wife because I knew she was trying to get through me to be able to sell them to the congregation. I said, honestly, there's nothing that ties me here to Racine. And why would I want and I was very blunt with her. I said, why would I want to have a burial plot for myself where my family is going to come and talk to me? Because they're never going to do that. I'm not there. My soul is in heaven. And yet we see that where even Christians will do that. They'll go to the cemetery, and that's a wonderful thing. Put flowers on there, put a cross, freshen up the grave, and then because you're honoring those whom God has placed in your family. But going there and then talking to your wife or your mother, that is this, except now you have them talking back to you. And God specifically forbids this. I remember getting some older members in my previous congregation upset with me because this is exactly what they did, because we buy into this pagan theology. So we spent a lot of time talking about the dangers of AI. So let's talk about some benefits yet. You know, how do we as Christians and the church have a responsibility to manage AI? So there, the logo that we use for Men Who Understood the Times. I used one of the AI models, and the very first one that we got, I liked it. I didn't make any more, so that's what we used. Okay. Uh, Last week I was up on Casper Mountain and I had taken one picture, one selfie, and said, uh, uh, here I was up there. And then there were a couple pastors that said, what about mountain lions? Aren't you afraid of mountain lions? And then a classmate of mine put a mountain lion on there. So the next day I took the next selfie, but I left a lot of room. And then I had my own face like I was scared. And I asked Chat GPT, put a realistic Bigfoot in there. And so it did. And it looks hilarious. And in fact, other people from Casper Mountain something here found it and then shared it. So, because I don't think Bigfoot gets enough popularity because he doesn't have his own podcast. So I made him more popular with a picture with me. And so there are some fun things to do with it. And then one of my members said he saw that on Facebook and he has a cabin up on Casper Mountain. He said his granddaughters, he would always tell them, "Oh, there's zebras here." "Oh, come on, Grandpa. There's no zebras that live here." So I taught him how to use Chat GPT, and then so he's gonna do that and put a zebra next to his cabin and show it to his 14-year-old granddaughter. She's not gonna buy it, which is fine, but just to have fun. And those are the things that you can use it for. Uh, Phil, why don't you talk about, as we wrap this episode up, how can AI be beneficial, and what responsibility do we as Christians and the Christian church have toward
Let
this
me talk.
specific tool? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me start with the church and then I'll talk about the individual. So I will put my cards down on the table. I'm very skeptical about the use of technology in the church proper. Um, and let me kind of ground that in what one of our Wauwatosa theologians, August Pieper, wrote in 1915. It would be against God's will to record portions from the Bible and good preaching on a phonograph, play it from the pulpit, and have it transmitted through cables to individual houses. It is no doubt true that the word can be powerful in every method of transmission, but the Lord Jesus Christ is as wise as we are, and in his love and wisdom, he made into apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, and teachers, not machines or a book, even the Bible, but rather human beings, people, special individual Christians. These people he expressly equipped and gave to his church for the ministry. Right. So again, our religion is based on words, right? Jesus Christ was the Logos, the Word. The Word was made flesh and tabernacled among us. And so he gave us words and he gave us embodied and fleshed souls to communicate his gospel to other people. Now, yes, technology can be used, but we have to relegate it to being a handmaiden and not the mistress of the house. And so from that perspective, yeah, I mean, making logos, checking finances, doing stuff like that are great applications of the technology. Applying it, getting sermon outlines from AI, I would be highly skeptical about. Now, again, arguing with an AI over something to kind of get the counter argument, that might be useful. As individuals, the one thing I've recommended to a couple people is Notebook LM. It's a product by Google. And if you open it up, it's literally a notebook where you drop a bunch of files and then you can talk to the LM about those files. The unique thing about Notebook LM is it restrains itself to the resources you provide, unless you tell it to go reach out to the internet or use its own knowledge. So you can drop in good, solid Christian resources there and talk to the LM about it. You can have it make a podcast about what you've uploaded. You can have it make slides and stuff like that. So that's a very useful case because you can constrain what it's considering when it talks back to you. And otherwise, if you're using a general purpose AI, just couch it in the, hey, from a confessional Lutheran perspective, holding to the Book of Concord, or even tell them you're Wisconsin Synod. It knows that well enough, even though, we're this stinky little church. It knows that well enough where it can give you responses in that light.
Yeah, and again, the church might use AI, for example, to create a slide uh, for an announcement, or I use uh, PowerPoint. That's what we use to put our slides up there, and then you know I didn't go to school for graphic design, uh, and yet that falls to me. A lot of times we might have an older lady that's going to be a member or going to be the secretary at the church. She may not know how to use this and make something look good. And we don't have a lot of money to spend on these kinds of things. So can we use AI to edit the bulletin? Can we use it to edit the sermon? Can we use it to create good slides and so forth? Use it to cut portions out of a podcast or a sermon to be able to use for social media. So there are benefits, but the key is we need to make able to make sure that it's the tool that we're using and not the tool that's using us. Josh, what do you have to say about how we as Christians have a responsibility when we use AI?
I like the way you pose the question in the show notes here. Do Christians have a responsibility to manage AI? How can the church use AI, or can the church afford to be passive in the face of AI? Um, I understand the thrust to avoid legalism. I do. However, I think the church should be passive about far fewer things than the church currently is passive about, including AI. I think that Christians need wisdom in using AI like any tool God gives us. Um, I, like Phil, will be very, very skeptical of um, developing any semblance of a reliance on artificial intelligence, especially if you were a church leader, including teachers and pastors, because if you are just parroting what the AI tells you over time, that will dull your edge. That will dull your ability to discern. And all it takes is one small little bit of leaven to work its way through the whole dough. Um, that would be bad. And to the extent that you have to go into original texts and read for yourself and then compare whatever the spirit of the age throws at you with God's word and say yay or nay on this thing. That is something that requires continuous sharpening. To that end, I do think that AI is very useful as a librarian for certain. I just asked AI here. Um, was the screen frozen? No, it's not. Please give me a page reference for where CFW Walther discusses communism. And here it gives two different, so communism and socialism, minutes of four lectures, 1879, pages 1 through 10. Okay. It's got two other books, one of which I actually have. And so now I know those are rather thick tomes. And I'm not sure, like the indices are rather Spartan on those books if you've ever read one. And so this will tell me exactly where it can go. From a secular perspective, again, I have a T-shirt that says "Certified YouTube Mechanic," um, and I'm thinking about buying a Toro Dingo, which is a little baby skid steer for my side business. It was like, hey, tell me which questions to ask about the maintenance of a 2017 Toro Dingo TX 1000 if I'm buying a used one. It was super helpful. It gave me like 45 points of what to look for. It's like, hey, by the way, the main hydraulic cylinder behind the bucket is prone to leaking on the in the first 4 months, and here's the serial numbers you can look at. They fixed it, but like if it's in the first half of that model year, be sure that you check the top cylinder for leaks. That's fantastic. I think it's super useful. It's going to require discernment, and humans always have to be in charge of that discernment because that's how God designed it.
All right, so we're going to wrap it up here. So lastly, just reminder, this is a tool, and it's a God-given tool like anything else. And like anything else, the devil will always twist whatever God gives us. Uh, and so we need to remember to use AI the same way we might use uh, social media or online worship. I was talking to Shelly just before we started recording. She was back in Minneapolis, where my mom is residing with my sister. My mom was in the hospital 3 weeks ago. She's back in now, but back then, she was there and she couldn't go to church. And so my mom, for some reason, she thinks that I'm her favorite preacher. Okay. And my sermons, since I moved out here, are not online for her to watch. She wasn't able to worship with us. Shelley was able to find maybe it was her home congregation there in Minneapolis. I'm not sure, but one of our Wells churches to worship at. It's not the best thing to do, okay? But for her, that was the best she could do. It's not the best for our members that can get to church. And the key is whether it's an online Bible study, whether it's a podcast like this, whether it's worship like a worship service like that. All of these kinds of things are just tools to be able to bring people closer together into the community of the church. If it takes us away, then the devil's using that tool to pull us away from Christ, his word, his sacraments. But with AI, with anything else, it's a tool. And if we can use it as God's sanctified children to bring people closer together for worship, for Bible study, to be in God's word and receiving his sacraments together, then we can use that and make it in a God pleasing manner. Till we meet next week.